Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First belt there for the 7th of August 2024. Let's start with where we usually start. Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. I was thinking about splitting off a section to this video about the Kursk attacks that are happening up into the territory of Kursk, into Russia. That news pieces is requiring an awful lot of time and an effort to talk about, but I think I just had to include it with this one in the other section. So look forward to that if you like. So here we have 1,230 personnel lost in the last 24 hours, according to General Staff. 8 tanks, so 1,230 is fairly high. It's a little uptick from the day before, I believe. 8 tanks is pretty much average. 29 armored personnel vehicles is above average. 67 artillery systems is over 3 times the average, so that's a significant number of artillery pieces taken out. 78 vehicles on fuel tanks is very high, and 21 pieces of special equipment is very high indeed. So we've had some really high numbers in some of these categories. I think there's an awful lot of activity obviously taking place north of the border, and an awful lot of activity happening right up and down the front line. I think it's very difficult for the Ukrainians in places like Toretsk and New York, although I haven't been on top of my mapping at all. I haven't looked at it at all, but from what I can gather from some sources, it's fairly desperate in some of those areas. On the other hand, the Russians are panicking about what's happening in Kursk, and I think all of this means that there's quite a bit of equipment being lost. Now, when you look at the Russian and Ukrainian loss stats, according to Andrew Perpetua, you see in terms of combat losses, the Ukrainians' combat asset losses almost 1-to-1, and then quite a few civilian losses for the Ukrainians. Meaning that the overall loss is about 1.5-to-1, maybe not quite that much. So not the best day for Ukrainian losses here in terms of the sheer numbers. We do have a book M1 lost. It was initially thought to be 2 books, but then the video footage was the same book from 2 different angles. Don't know that it's on purpose or anything, but just some people are thinking it's initially 2 lost by the Ukrainians. Some surveillance and comms equipment. A 2S-22 Bogdana, so that's possibly taken out by Lancet. As you can see, Lancet's still causing problems. The Bogdana is the Ukrainian-made self-propelled howitzer that was in the Kherson area. There's a Caesar damage. Is that the first one I've seen damaged? I don't know, but interesting. FPV drone. Lancets, as mentioned, have been pretty devastating over the last, I don't know, is it maybe 6 months since they, or less than that, since they've really picked up using those. And then when we look at the APCs, we can see a couple of Humvees and FV 103 Spartan UK provided vehicle there, M113, and MRAPs, a lot of MRAPs destroyed and abandoned. Cougar H's abandoned and hit by an Iskander strike. So it looks like all of these Cougar H's, and I don't even know those vehicles, were taken out by an Iskander in one fell swoop. So that most of these, that's kind of well, not really skewing because it's happened, right? But that one strike appears to be responsible for half, maybe, of the Ukrainian combat asset losses, and then a number of pickup trucks and SUVs destroyed and damaged there. Let's go to the Russian losses for the last 24 hours. We've got a Ka-52 attack helicopter taken out here, so that's a high value piece of kit, and that's in the Kursk region. In fact, there are some claims that there are 2 Ka-52s that have been taken out. And there's also the claim of a Mi-8 that's been taken down with an FPV drone. Ka-52 going down here, I don't know, how reliable this is as a kind of it's some feels from Andrew, but he says feels like an FPV drone took out the Ka-52. So okay, some surveillance and comms equipment, recovery vehicle, some artillery pieces, and then a number of tanks, including a T-90M, abandoned and hit by a drone drop bomb, could be destroyed. Track garden shed, a tank with mine rollers, T-72B3, and a number of other tanks. So a fair few tanks there and a fair few infantry fighting vehicles. Most of these categories, including the APCs, have most of the vehicles in these categories have been either abandoned or destroyed, and that includes MTLBs and all sorts there. Humvee, Russian Humvee, so it must have been a captured one, hit by an FPV drone. Okay, some trucks, ATVs, four wheelers, that is quads and golf buggies, and some civilian vehicles as well taken out. Motorcycles, loafs, pickup trucks, etc., etc. So quite a lot of equipment for the Russians. And with that helicopter on there, I think they've had the worst day of it, um, given that high value loss there. Okay, then moving on. This is the book that War Vehicle Tracker has. Two book tellers were destroyed by a Tornado S in Sumy Oblast, and then the correction actually due to visible damage from the cook-offs of the launcher and radar. The second book, it seems to be the same vehicle, which was destroyed in the second strike. So same vehicle taken out several times there, making him think it was two vehicles. So that's the book that was mentioned on the previous list. Okay, interceptions of 7 Russian Zala and Supercam drones by Ukrainian FPVs, and also a big active fundraising on FPV hunters for Russian reconnaissance drones from Special Kherson Cat here. This is something we're starting to see more and more, and this is really, really good news. So we've talked for a long time about one of the really big challenges for the Ukrainians has been these reconnaissance drones and their ability to spot acquire targets and spot for Iskander missiles that are then sent in behind Ukrainian lines to hit high value targets. We are now seeing more and more of these drones, these reconnaissance drones, get taken out by Ukrainian FPVs. There are other ways of taking these out, and we've seen some innovation with what was it? It was a Estrella 10 that was given some upgrades to be able to take out these drones really effectively. And also things like the Yak 52 propeller plane with someone in the back with a shotgun, all sorts of different ways of taking these drones out. It's just really good news that they are working hard on that, and with some success. Okay, the Russian Su-34 fighter at Morozovsk Air Base that was seen on satellite imagery to be destroyed. There's now footage of it at ground level, um, uh, showing that it is absolutely mullered, taken out, and that's a $36 million piece of kit. Just quite a big loss there for the Russians, and also talk that there were 2 others that were damaged in that same. Um, in that same strike on that airbase. So some better visually confirmed evidence of that Su-34. Now, military writes that a Mi-8 helicopter was hit with an FPV drone, but Russians managed to land it on the ground safely, apparently. Actually, this could well be caught on camera. Here we have a Mi-8 being no, this is Mi-28 full video of the first ever attack on a Mi-28 helicopter by a long FPV drone, the M2 CSO SBU unit, a lot of letters, yesterday in the sky of the Kursk region. So someone saying a Mi-8, another saying a Mi-28 here, but this video shows the drone appearing to hit the tail rotor, and then, well, it kind of cuts out before that happens. So this is the one here. It goes in very close to the tail rotor, and you think it's taken out there. And then 2 other images of drones getting close, or 2 other bits of footage of drones getting close and then cutting out. So obviously, electronic warfare operating from those helicopters on drones, but one of them getting through and hitting, and that could well have caused that helicopter to do exactly as said here, land on the ground safely, but possibly out of operation. Here's the Ka-52 helicopter that was apparently shot down by Liberation Forces. That's yesterday now in the Kursk Oblast. So they have potentially lost 2 Ka-52s, although the second one is just a mere rumor. But there's certainly one of them taken out here. And I don't know if that's the one that Andrew Perpetua's included in his list and said that that could be from a drone. I don't know, but I think that's good for the Ukrainians. They are able to, well, able to take out some helicopters using drones, at least with in one case. And we heard the other week of one being taken out just as it was taking off somewhere else on the front near the front. I can't remember where that one was actually, but we're starting to see this innovation and a new threat to the Russian helicopters here. Which is good news for Ukrainians. Two destroyed tanks on a Kamaz in Kursk region. I reported this when I was giving you the breaking news of what's going on in Kursk. I think there's a few bits and pieces that have been lost there now. There's several bits of footage of Russian forces surrendering in the Kursk region. This is a second bit of footage. I showed you another one yesterday of supposedly 35 soldiers surrendering. I mean, the whole Kursk attack seems to be doing. The Ukrainians are doing a really good job there, it appears. And then looking at some equipment stocks, this is what a dying tank stock looks like. It says one source looking at these satellite images of tank storages. So that's what it was, and that's what it is now. As you can see, they are getting lower and lower on these pieces of equipment. Now, there have been some. I haven't seen a covert cabal video yet, but John P's done another satellite imagery analysis. A number of people coming out with stuff. Just some interesting. I mean, I'm not going to read you through this entire thread here, but some interesting nuggets. Like some bases, there's actually an increase of hulls. It looks like they are stockpiling. They're taking from a number of bases and maybe putting in a central base, but essentially there's an awful lot of kit that is being cannibalized, and there's evidence of this in several ways that you can see. I didn't show it to you actually, but there was a couple of weeks ago. I think the video's here. Yeah, this is the one here. You've got a couple of guns from a BMP-1 mounted on artillery framework, basically, and it just shows that the cannibalization isn't just to make whole vehicles, but also taking parts off the BMPs to, in this case, to make artillery. But yeah, they are properly cannibalizing all sorts of stuff here, and go and check out. It's linked. It should be linked in the description below. You can check out the details of his analysis of the cannibalization and the stockpiling or the depletion of stockpiles of these different BMPs and the different bases that they are being taken from, or indeed taken to. Right. Okay. Finally, we have just a nice little infographic. You often see these things, over time. There are so many of these types of videos on YouTube, actually, but this is a good way of looking at some of the infantry fighting vehicle losses for the Russians over time by type. And BMP-2s, interestingly, are the ones. So that John P thread we just seen said there are no BMP-2 stocks left. Which is interesting because I mean this is what they've lost most of, and yet it's still the highest number of losses is coming from BMP-2s, but they're trying to reactivate a bunch of BMP-1. So this is going back. This is January, February 2023. So as you can see, BMP-1s are starting to be lost at a greater and greater rate, and BMP-3s that are still being made. But these older vehicles are being lost more and more. Overtook the BTR 82, and you got some of these older ones down here. But essentially, if we go right to we're almost at the end here. Essentially, the BMP-2 is still the one that's had the highest losses. Let's pause that. So there we are, pretty much almost where we're at now. BMP-1s are trying to get more and more out of storage. With all of these vehicles actually, and that's according to Oryx data. Just a nice way of looking at that. Right, according to strikes, according to Tim White here, strikes last night. There were 30 drones sent into Ukraine, and all 30 were shot down. There is some news of debris falling in certain places here and there, but it doesn't look like any major issue has taken place as a result of quite a few drones. And if you think if they are costing 193,000, well, that's what they were costing from Iran. I presume they're making most of their own ones now. That's a lot of money they're expending on doing these drone strikes, and to have lost all 30 of 30 they're sending is testament to the ability for the Ukrainians to shoot down these drones now with these mobile defense forces having these audios positions set up all around Ukraine to listen for the sound of drones and then centralize that data into a computer to be able to know where these drones are and therefore where they can be shot down by these mobile drone teams. That is hopefully a cheaper way of shooting these down than using a very expensive NASAMS interceptors or whatever. So that's good news for the Ukrainians. Kursk, there's some strikes maybe into Kursk. Someone saying it looks like an airbase being hit in Kursk here by some strikes. I haven't got too much information on any strikes by Ukraine, particularly other than here's another one. Crimean Telegram channel reports explosions in the area of Oktyabrskaya airfield and neighbouring train station. According to reports, the airfield no longer hosts aircraft but is used as an ammunition warehouse. Crimean authorities already closed down the railway between Simferopol and Jankoy. So some strikes taking place in Crimea. That was yesterday, really from the 24 hours up to that. So I don't have any data of any strikes from last night or for the last 24 hours particularly, but because of my time zone, I'm completely skewed in how I look at data and how it relates to what's going on in Ukraine and when the data comes out. And so I may have missed some things. I don't know. I apologize if I have. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. First one to note is Tim White yesterday said in a thread that he reported on Russia claiming to have stopped an attempted landing on the Tendriska Spit south of Odessa. So that must be the Spit in the Kherson Oblast, the occupied Oblast. Today, Ukrainian intel has released this video claiming they destroyed Russian electronic warfare system and armored vehicles, sustaining no casualties. So differing claims going on there. We'll see if anything comes out in a wash. And then there have been some like cryptic. This wasn't the only one. I've accidentally deleted the one that was actually more interesting, saying, things are happening, some funky things are going on. Just wait, and you'll find out, type thing. And here's another one. In coming hours, the world will witness extraordinary scenes and very important developments. Just a couple of really cryptic things coming in regarding what Ukraine might be doing, whether this pertains to Kursk and the attack on that Spit, and a few other things of Ukraine taking a bit of an not control, but trying to shift the initiative in their favor. They're having trouble down on the eastern front still. It could be diversionary. It could be of operational importance for those places. So yeah, we'll see. Right, and then we have what else? Okay, well, loads of information on Kursk. And initially, as Andrew Perpetua lays out here, initially the Russians were denying or saying that they've repelled the Ukrainians in the Kursk area. Official channel of the Ministry of Defense removed from its post a paragraph about the retreat of the Ukrainian armed forces back abroad, back over the border. It's okay to make mistakes, especially when there's an ability to edit posts. And then here we have another Russian source saying the Ukrainians, the insult for the Ukrainians, on the Kursk border are building up serious forces in case someone hasn't figured it out yet. And you have the equipment there, the manpower to the effing heap. I don't know what that means. And those figures that are stated in the official media, it's all BS. Do you think they journalists were crawling under the bushes and counting the Ukrainians? No, nobody effing counted them, because in this situation, it's impossible to establish full objective control over the entire border. There are also no idiots sitting there. They are pulling forces secretly, most likely at night, and when the question about providing for those who are on the border enters the chat. Stupidly blind border guards to whom volunteers are fussing surveillance devices. I don't know what that means. And even then, not in the required quantities. I said everything about conscripts earlier today. Here it is clear they have nothing at all. That's how we fight. So in other words, is all going very badly for the Russians, and what's being reported is not true. So on and so forth. And yeah, more on this in different areas. um, that Andrew Perpetua provides. You can read these. These are coming from Russian sources, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's go and find out exactly what is happening. Well, actually, Andrew adds to this and says Ukraine has been systematically destroying the electrical infrastructure and communications network in the Sudzha area for weeks. So we just heard that Sudzha is this town that has just been taken by, or village that's been taken by the Ukrainians across the border there. Andrew Perpetua says there were many more that we didn't have time to geolocate, which is why we need more geolocators helping us. And he says more and more, evidence here of things getting blown up. And they also damaged a gas pipeline, which for some reason people keep saying is a reason they attacked, so on and so forth. So they've been laying up the it looks like the foundations for this attack for some time. So over the last sort of 24 48 hours, you've seen this development of what's going on here over the border into Kursk. Two majors, which is a Russian telegram channel, amidst the Ukrainian advance in Kursk. By nightfall, it became clear that it was impossible to dislodge the enemy forces from the territory they had occupied. Russian airstrikes, which had shown a high effectiveness during the day, were now hampered by the high density of enemy air defense systems. City of Sucia has been evacuated. Government agencies and the population were evacuated with the help of regional authorities. And transport and ambulance crews were allocated. The governor is in touch with the troops, describing the situation as tense but under control. Over the past 24 hours, 16 armored vehicles of the Ukrainian armed forces were reported destroyed. In fact, more by morning, and 2 Buk air defense systems. So that's what the Russians are claiming. Both sides are pulling reserves to the front line. At 10 o'clock at night, according to open data, the Ukrainian armed forces were in the settlement of Dorino, Dilkovo, Gogolevka, Goncharovka. The situation is difficult near the settlement of Oleshnia. Our strongholds have been taken. The enemy was conducting remote mining of the Sudzha Belitsa highway. By nightfall, there were 150 to 200 Ukrainian troops and up to 15 units of enemy equipment in the areas mentioned. Our drone crews destroyed several units of enemy equipment at night. Our defense worked in the region at night. They reported shot down missiles and drones during the day and night. The official information was received about wounded and injured. The coming days will be difficult. The enemy has at least a motorized infantry battalion on our and adjacent territory, up to 2,000 personnel as a second echelon, uses many drones and skillfully uses air defense and electronic warfare systems. PS, looks like things are going very bad for the Russians, says the source here, the Dead District, that they admit all this. And did he speak about 2 books that have been destroyed in the Kherson region? So, yeah, there's maybe some confusion about that. And then, as we saw from War Vehicle Tracker, that was actually potentially 1 book and not 2. So Anton Gerashchenko said Russian Z blogger 13th described the situation in Kursk. Meanwhile, Putin has spoken on the situation. He promised to talk it through with law enforcers. As of this morning, the Ukrainians have broken through the Russian state border and are entering into some of those places that we mentioned earlier. The enemy has maneuvered about 10 kilometers deep into the border, and now they are stopping, pulling in reserves. They are not stopping pulling in reserves, occupying the above mentioned settlements. 2 of our helicopters were shot down yesterday. Okay, so that could be 2 Ka-52s. That could be a Ka-52 and a Mi-8, or it could be a Ka-52 and a Mi-28, depending on what we glean from the claims that we saw previously. Air defense has been pulled to an effing heap. This is not a media move by morons from the Russian Volunteer Corps. This is a real offensive and a breakthrough of the state border of the Russian Federation, which is the way, which, by the way, is sacred and inviolable. Or not anymore. You can make mistakes, but you can't lie, said Bulasov, who is their defense minister, of course. And Prigozhin has said, if we do not learn to tell the truth, we will not win wars. These are quotes that are obviously very apt now. Remember the quotes of these people more often. Maybe something will change in your minds. Nothing critical is happening, but nothing good is happening either. A tough and timely solution is needed. So, yeah, you have, that's from the 13th. A testimony there of what is going on. PS01 here says Kursk Day 2, according to Russian channels, the density of air defense prevents them, from using air power. So that's interesting. So that the Russians are less able to use air and their own aircraft to support the defense of Kursk. Ukrainian troops are 15 kilometers deep into Russian territory. Front width is 10 to 11 kilometers, and that was, some time ago now. Ukrainians are expanding operations. yeah, present in 11 settlements possibly there at the moment. Just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude, for the northern Kharkiv offensive, Russians reached a depth of 7.8 kilometers, according to Deep State. Ukraine has gone twice that distance in 24 hours. So actually, that it's potentially really significant. This Ukrainians have captured one tank and several APVs in Kursk this morning. And yes, we got video of a Stuka dive bomber drone widely used in the Kursk offensive. Fixed wing drones have a wider operational range than conventional FPV drones, so they appear to be using a range of drones to help support their attack. The Ukrainians, Russians are sending medics from Moscow to Kursk to attend their numerous wounded. Ukrainians are covering the Kursk operational theatre with deep strikes as far as Kuchertov, which is about 60 kilometers from the border. Um, and then there is this idea that Sudzha has now been lost. There is no panic in Sudzha chat, says Pier01. Ukrainians may assault the city soon, and the official evacuation has not started yet. Quote, we don't abandon our own. 3 fortification lines were erected in the Kursk region back in 2022, but for some reason, conscripts were not informed about them, only the journalists. The result, and so on and so forth. So, just loads of information just coming out, flooding out about this. Local Russian channels reporting that Sudzha has fallen to the Ukrainians. And first line of defense of the Russian armed forces in the Kursk region was passed at the beginning of the operation. The second line begins around the settlement of Sudzha. There is no third line. Settlement Sudzha had almost no fortifications. So yeah, really, really interesting. Lots of data coming out about the goings on. No Reports has a thread on that if you want to check it out to see what the latest is. The Ukrainian armed forces liberated the settlements of Darina, Sverdilkovo, and Gogolivka, according to Russian sources. Honcharivka and Oleshnia are said to also be taken by the Ukrainians, but that's not been confirmed. Russian sources claim strikes are carried out on Ukrainian concentrations themselves. So what does he say? Which is just on or near Makhnovka, which is just south of Sudzha, and we confirm that Ukrainian forces have made more ground gains there, and the advance has not just stopped at the villages from that were mentioned previously. TikTok apparently going a bit crazy. In Kursk on the border, our conscripts stood in the first line. Some of our guys were captured and the AFU struck. Akhmat dispersed, so they are the Chechen special forces, taking more favourable positions in the rear. Well. Where did we hear that before? What else? Multiple sources claiming that the Ukrainians have pulled up a fair amount of air defense near the Kursk region, which makes it hard for Russian aviation to give close air support, as mentioned previously. And then, some maps, quite a bit of mapping going on, but obviously I haven't had time to look into the mapping. Sudzha Kursk region, per Russian sources, the city has been mostly evacuated due to the ongoing Ukrainian operation. That's now claimed to have been fully captured. Air alarm in Kursk region, so on and so forth. Lots and lots taking place there. Oops, something crazy is going on with my. Turns out, well, it wasn't plugged in. Okay, so I could go on and on. Goodness, there's loads here from on No Reports' thread here. Just seeing if there's anything else that needs. We're going to talk about this in a second. Ukrainian equipment being seen on the move. I mean, it's interesting. This could be a real. Could end up being quite a useful incursion by the Ukrainians, really moving deep into Russian territory and forcing the Russians to actually, pull resources from elsewhere in a very serious way. Here claim that Sudzha's fallen. And here's a map to give you a sense of the area that potentially the Ukrainians have taken. And this has then caused. Where have we got it? I don't know if it's. Oh yeah, this has caused this has caused Putin to call an urgent meeting with members of the Russian Security Council. According to their information, this is Kremlin media. A meeting with the Russian government is also planned. A video from the emergency meeting of the Security Council, which Putin called, has appeared online. The Russian dictator looks very nervous. He could not hide his alarm about the fighting in the Kursk region. He announced a meeting with security agencies and called for assistance to the residents of the region. Then you've got some talk about exactly why this is an important area. Intel Schizo has done a thread. I won't go through it now, but it talks about the railways being really important there. There's quite a lot of strategic importance here, or operational importance, sorry, more likely, as railways go through here to feed like the Kharkiv offensives, and it can present problems for the Russians in a number of different ways. But you can go and check that out by looking for Intel Schizo on Twitter and see their detailed exposition of what could be the rationale behind this, and how it could well be quite a clever attack by the Ukrainians. Now, next to reports that Russian Z channels are saying that the AFU has taken control of the Suja gas metering station. Station is an important border facility for the transportation of Russian gas to Europe. No official confirmation of that yet, though. So there might be reasons why that area is particularly useful for the Ukrainians to take. So that's a developing situation, and I'll try and keep on top of that. But probably worth you guys checking out some of those sources on the socials to see what is going on, because it'll probably be developing quite rapidly throughout the day. And just one other thing to note: this is completely not to do with what's going on in Kursk, but there's a Chryso Wiki thread saying Russia faces an increasingly severe shortage of workers due to the war in Ukraine, with a shortfall of as many as 1.7 million people. Public transport has been especially badly hit due to drivers taking better paid military jobs. Women are being recruited to fill the jobs, so on and so forth. There's a fairly long thread there on the challenges that the Russians are facing in terms of labor shortages. And of course, as I've mentioned many times before, that then leads to inflation, as you have fewer people, so you're having to attract people to those jobs by offering higher and higher wages, and that leads to an inflation wage spiral that then causes problems, and then you have to try and cope with that, as well as all the issues of paying for an incredibly expensive war, so on and so forth. This is not good news for Russia, and these kind of indicators show that there are probably cracks, some severe cracks, that have developed in the Russian economy and in Russian society as a direct result of this war taking place. Anyway, that's enough from me. That was longer than I was hoping, but mainly due to Kursk, what's going on in Kursk. Keep an eye on that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.